The order exists before it is read. It is already complete when it begins to move, already finalized, already stripped of uncertainty. It does not argue for itself. It does not justify its timing. It does not explain its assumptions. It arrives as a finished object, stamped, copied, and forwarded in identical language, unchanged by the hands that carry it. Paper passes across desks. Ink dries. Carbon sheets are peeled away. Each version is exact. Each line is aligned. Each word has been chosen not for persuasion, but for compliance. The order is not framed as a possibility. It is framed as continuity. It moves through offices built for movement, through rooms designed to translate intention into action, through corridors where urgency has long been replaced by routine. The sound of its passage is subtle. The scrape of a chair, the click of a stamp, the brief pause before acknowledgement. No one asks why it has arrived now. Timing is not debated. Timing is assumed to have already been considered elsewhere, by someone else, at a higher level of abstraction. The order does not request confidence. It presumes it. It is read the same way everywhere, slowly, precisely, without emphasis. Each sentence is processed as instruction, not information. There is no language of doubt embedded within it, no conditional phrasing, no alternatives offered. The grammar is absolute. Once read, it becomes a task. Hands move to files. Schedules are adjusted. Resources are reallocated with practiced efficiency. The order begins to reshape the day around itself, bending existing plans without resistance. It does not interrupt the system. It activates it. Acknowledgements are sent upward. Brief, formulaic, received, logged. The system confirms itself through these exchanges, each confirmation reinforcing the assumption that nothing within the order requires examination. Confirmation replaces evaluation. The order does not travel alone. It carries with it expectations formed long before its arrival, that clarity exists somewhere above, that conflicts have already been resolved, that objections, if they ever existed, were addressed and dismissed in rooms no longer accessible. No objections appear here. There is no mechanism. The order has passed the threshold where questions are possible. It has entered the domain of execution, where relevance is measured only by accuracy of repetition. Each recipient becomes a conduit, not a filter. Time advances in increments defined by protocol. Deadlines are calculated. Movements are synchronized. The order begins to impose its rhythm, aligning multiple independent actions into a single forward motion. Nothing about it feels urgent. That is its most dangerous quality. Urgency invites scrutiny. Routine does not. The order feels familiar, even as it rearranges everything beneath it. Its structure resembles countless others that came before. Its authority is derived not from novelty, but from resemblance. It looks correct because it looks official. By the time it reaches its final recipient, it has already become untouchable. It no longer belongs to anyone. It belongs to the system now. And the system has already begun to carry it forward, toward an outcome that no longer requires intention to occur. The environment in which the order descends is designed to remove friction. It is built around clarity, not discussion, around alignment, not interpretation. Every position within it exists to receive instruction, translate it into a narrower form, and pass it onward. Authority is distributed vertically, not horizontally, and information follows the same geometry. At the top, distance exists. Not physical distance, but conceptual distance. Decisions are abstracted, reduced to language precise enough to survive travel. By the time an order is released downward, it has already been stripped of context that might complicate. What remains is intent without explanation. The structure below is not passive, it is highly active, constantly adjusting itself to accommodate incoming directive. Schedules are modular, units are interchangeable, responsibility is segmented into manageable portions, each clearly defined, each incapable of seeing beyond its assigned boundary. No single position holds the entire shape of the action being assembled. That is not a flaw, it is the point. The chain is long enough that responsibility thins as it travels. Each level handles only what is immediately relevant. The order is never seen in full, only in fragments tailored to specific functions. One segment concerns movement, another concerns supply, another concerns timing. None are framed as dependent on the others. Each segment is correct in isolation. Meetings occur, but they are not deliberative. They exist to synchronize understanding, not to generate. Language is formal, repetitive, exact. Questions, when asked, are procedural. Clarification is requested only to ensure accuracy, never to challenge premise. No one is rewarded for reinterpretation. Competence is measured by fidelity. Records are kept meticulously. Logs are updated. Reports flow upward in standardized formats, confirming readiness, confirming alignment, confirming that nothing has deviated from instruction. These reports do not describe reality. They describe compliance. The system does not require enthusiasm, it requires precision. Training reinforces this architecture. From the earliest stages, personnel are conditioned to separate execution from evaluation. Evaluation is someone else's task, assigned at a different level in a different phase. Execution is immediate. Execution is local. Execution is unquestioned. The hierarchy reinforces itself through silence. Silence is interpreted as agreement. Agreement is interpreted as correctness. Correctness becomes justification. The order moves downward again, transformed into narrower directives, each one more specific, each one more insulated from revision. By the time it reaches the lowest levels of action, it no longer resembles a decision. It resembles physics. Schedules lock into place. Timetables align. Dependencies are mapped. The structure begins to behave like a machine responding to a single input. Once engaged, stopping it would require an explicit counterorder, one with equal authority, equal clarity, and equal reach. No such counterorder exists, not because alternatives were never considered, but because consideration does not leave a trace. Once the system commits, what remains visible is only what has been authorized to move. The structure is efficient. That efficiency is celebrated internally as discipline, reliability, strength. The absence of friction is interpreted as health, but the same design that prevents chaos also prevents correction. By the time the order settles fully into the structure, it has become indistinguishable from the structure itself. To question it would require questioning the system that delivered it, the hierarchy that validated it, and the processes that defined competence within it. No position is designed for. The order does not survive objections because objections are suppressed. It survives because the structure leaves no space for them to exist. The moment execution begins is not announced. There is no signal that separates planning from action, no audible shift, no visible threshold. The transition occurs quietly, as procedures replace preparation without pause. The order does not demand readiness checks. Readiness has already been reported. It does not request confirmation. Confirmation has already been logged. Actions begin at the exact time specified, not because the moment feels right, but because the schedule dictates it. Movements align across distances that are never acknowledged. Separate groups act simultaneously without awareness of one another, connected only by identical instructions and synchronized clocks. Each action is precise. Each step follows the sequence exactly as it was written. Deviation would require intent. There is none. Communication during execution is minimal and formal. Messages confirm completion of subtasks, not conditions. Language remains narrow. Nothing descriptive is transmitted unless explicitly required. There is no vocabulary for uncertainty embedded in the process at this stage. The order assumes conditions are stable, so stability is assumed. Personnel carry out their roles with practiced efficiency. Training asserts itself automatically. Muscle memory replaces analysis. Checklists are followed. Timelines are honored. Each individual action is correct by definition, because correctness has been defined as alignment with instruction. No one pauses to assess the broader effect. There is no mechanism to do so. Assessment belongs to a different phase, one that will come later, after execution is complete. During execution, observation is limited to confirmation that the next step can proceed. Silence fills the spaces between actions. It is not an absence of sound, but an absence of interruption. Nothing interferes with the flow. The order advances through its sequence as designed, unaffected by minor inconsistencies that appear at the edges. These inconsistencies are logged, not interpreted. Timing is everything. Adjustments are not authorized. Synchronization depends on uniformity, and uniformity depends on adherence. Every unit trusts that the others are doing exactly the same thing at exactly the same time, because that trust is built into the system. Coordination replaces judgment. Reports continue to move upward, stripped of narrative. Status updates indicate progress relative to plan, not deviation from reality. Each report confirms that the order is being executed as intended. The confirmation reinforces momentum. At no point does the order encounter resistance. Not because resistance would be punished, but because resistance has no language here. There is no procedural entry for hesitation. There is no checkbox for doubt. There is only completion. The system rewards completion. As execution progresses, the order becomes increasingly difficult to dependencies lock into place. One completed action enables the next, creating a chain that tightens with every successful step. To stop would require unraveling what has already been done. No one is assigned that responsibility. The order does not adapt. It does not respond. It does not listen. It continues forward at the same pace, indifferent to minor variations that fall outside its parameter. Those variations do not stop execution. They are absorbed by it. By the time the final stages begin, the order has fully replaced discretion. Action proceeds because it must, not because it is reevaluated, not because it is reaffirmed, but because it has not been countermeasured. and the absence of a counterorder is treated as confirmation that everything remains correct. The first indications appear as irregularities, not alarms. They surface in places the order does not monitor closely, at the margins of execution where confirmation is still possible but interpretation is not. Timings slip by increments too small to trigger escalation. Resources arrive where they were instructed to arrive, but not where they. Movement continues, though alignment begins to strain. Reports reflect completion, not coherence. The order remains unchanged. Information moves upward, but only in the shapes permitted by protocol. Anomalies are recorded as data points, detached from consequence. Each is classified as temporary, local, or external. None are framed as structural. The language used to describe them does not allow for that interpretation. The system treats deviation as noise. Procedures respond by tightening, not adjusting. Confirmation requests increase. Redundancy is applied. The order is reaffirmed through repetition, as if clarity alone can correct emerging misalignment. No one introduces alternative instructions, because alternatives are not authorized. The order has no provision for partial failure. As execution continues, dependencies begin to conflict. One action completes successfully but creates conditions that undermine another. These conflicts are invisible to individual positions, each of which sees only its own compliance. The order's design assumes harmony between components that no longer exists. Still, nothing stops. Attempts to resolve local inconsistencies remain procedural. Requests for clarification move upward through formal channels, but by the time they are received, the order has already progressed beyond the point where clarification would alter outcome. Responses return as restatements of original instruction. The system interprets this as confirmation. The rigidity of the structure, once a source of efficiency, now accelerates error. Correct actions amplify incorrect assumptions. Precision compounds miscalculation. The more accurately the order is followed, the further reality drifts from the conditions the order requires to succeed. Confusion appears, but it has no authority. There is no language for contradiction that does not sound like failure to comply. Observations that fall outside expectation are reframed as execution error, rather than indicators of systemic flaw. Responsibility remains localized, even as consequences become distributed. The order continues to move forward, untouched by the growing disparity between instruction and outcome. At this stage, the failure is no longer preventable, but it is not yet recognized as failure. The system is still functioning as designed. Messages are sent, tasks are completed. The hierarchy remains intact. What is collapsing is alignment, not structure. The order survives every signal that suggests revision. It survives because it is insulated from feedback that would require it to change. By the time the effects of the flaw begin to converge, the order has already passed through all the points where it could have been altered. What remains is momentum. And momentum does not ask whether it is correct. It only asks whether anything is still pushing back. Nothing is. The moment the failure becomes undeniable is not marked by shock. It arrives without ceremony, without a clear boundary separating functioning from breakdown. The system does not register collapse as a singular event. It registers only accumulation, effects compound. Dependencies fail to. Timelines no longer align, yet the order continues to be referenced as if alignment still exists. What collapses first is coordination. Actions that were designed to intersect now pass one another without contact. Support arrives after it is relevant. Movement continues into spaces that no longer correspond to expectation. Resources are present, but inaccessible. Signals are transmitted, but arrive too late to influence outcome. The order does not respond. It remains the same document, the same sequence, the same authority. There is no mechanism to suspend it. Suspension would require acknowledgement of fault, and fault has not been assigned. Without fault, there can be no interruption. The structure attempts to compensate through volume. More messages, more confirmations, more insistence on adherence. The response to breakdown is increased enforcement of the very process that produced it. Discipline intensifies. Deviations are corrected with greater urgency. This accelerates the collapse. Loss appears not as spectacle, but as absence. Units fail to arrive. Connections dissolve. Entire segments of the plan cease to function, not because they were attacked or resisted, but because the conditions that sustain them no longer exist. Still, reports continue upward. They grow thinner, less descriptive, focused narrowly on what can still be. Silence expands between updates, but silence is interpreted as delay, not disaster. The order remains the reference point against which reality is measured, even as reality no longer resembles it. No individual action is reckless. Each follows instruction. The collapse is not the result of panic or disobedience. It is the product of consistency applied beyond relevance. The system does exactly what it was built to do, long after what it was built to do no longer applies. Scale becomes visible only in retrospect, but the system does not operate in retrospect. It operates forward, step by step, unaware of total cost. Consequence is distributed across time and space, never concentrated enough in one place to trigger intervention. There are no final stands, no decisive moments. Only the gradual realization that recovery is no longer possible, paired with the absence of any authorized response to that realization. By the time execution winds down, there is nothing left to complete. The order has reached its terminus not because it succeeded, but because it exhausted the environment it was meant to operate within. What remains is not chaos. It is quiet. A quiet, produced by processes running without effect, commands issued without recipient, confirmations no longer requested because there is nothing left to confirm. The collapse does not end the system, it simply passes through it. And when it is over, the order remains intact on paper, flawless in form, having failed completely in function. After the collapse, there is no reckoning. The system does not pause to absorb what has occurred. It resumes its baseline state with minor adjustments, as if recovering from strain rather than failure. Schedules are rewritten, rosters are updated, vacancies are noted without commentary. The language of record shifts from execution to administration. The order is filed. It is not annotated. It is not revised. It is archived alongside others of similar format and authority. Its existence is preserved as documentation, not examined as cause. Within the system, the transition from active to inactive erases urgency. What is no longer active is no longer relevant. Reports are compiled after the fact, but they do not reconstruct the sequence in full. Each focuses on its assigned segment, describing outcomes without link. Loss is quantified, but not connected. Discrepancies are attributed to circumstance, environment, or timing. The order itself is not named. Meetings occur at higher levels, but they are brief and structured. Language remains careful. The discussion avoids singular responsibility. Failures are described in passive terms. Processes are reviewed without reference to the decision that set them in motion. There is no corrective directive equal in authority to the one that failed. What emerges instead are minor procedural updates, adjustments designed to prevent recurrence in abstract terms. None address the specific conditions that allowed the order to proceed unchanged through every stage of contradiction. Within the structure, careers continue. Assignments rotate. Promotions proceed. Those who executed the order are evaluated on compliance, not outcome. Their records reflect accuracy of execution. The system rewards what it can. Silence settles over the event, not as denial, but as absorption. The failure becomes background, folded into institutional memory without definition. It is referenced indirectly, if at all, as a case study stripped of context. The order survives this process intact. It is never formally challenged. It is never rescinded. It is simply no longer issued again, replaced by others that resemble it closely enough to feel familiar, yet different enough to suggest progress. The structure remains. It continues to produce orders, to transmit them downward, to convert certainty into action. The absence of accountability does not weaken it. It stabilizes. The system prefers continuity over correction. Somewhere within the archives, the order remains exactly as it was when first released. Its language unchanged. Its authority preserved. Its failure undocumented in the same format that authorized it. Nothing within the structure requires that failure. What matters is that the process continues. And as long as it does, the conditions that allowed the order to survive every objection remain in place, ready to receive the next one.